You've been working, you've been trying. Maybe you've been working harder than almost anyone you know, putting in the hours, making the sacrifices, doing what you were told would eventually pay off. And yet, if you're being completely honest with yourself, you look at your bank account, you look at your life, and something doesn't match. The results don't match the effort. And you can't quite figure out why. I want to ask you something, and I need you to really sit with it, not skim over it, not brush past it the way most people do. Actually ask yourself, what do you believe about money? Not what you know intellectually, not what you've read in a book. What do you actually in your gut believe about money? Because here's what I've discovered after decades of studying human behavior, working with people across every income level, every background, every walk of life. The single biggest reason people don't have the financial life they want has nothing to do with strategy. It has nothing to do with opportunity. It has nothing to do with education. It has everything to do with what they believe. And the terrifying part, most people don't even know what they believe. They've never examined it. They've inherited it. They've absorbed it from conversations they heard as children, from environments they grew up in, from the way money was discussed or avoided or fought over in their home. These beliefs live deep inside them, running like silent software in the background, and every decision they make about money, every action they take or don't take, is being filtered through that programming. You might be thinking right now, I don't have limiting beliefs about money. I want more money. I work hard. I'm not the problem. And I understand that reaction. I really do. But wanting something and believing you deserve it, believing it's possible for you, believing that accumulating it won't change you in some negative way, those are completely different things. You can want something desperately while simultaneously holding beliefs that make sure you never quite get there. That contradiction is at the heart of what we're going to explore today. This isn't about judging where you are. This is about understanding why you're there so you can finally actually change it. Let me tell you something I've seen play out so many times. It stops surprising me. You take two people, same city, same economy, roughly similar starting point. One of them, within 10 years, has built real financial security, maybe even wealth. The other one is still struggling, still stuck in the same cycle, still telling themselves that they just need a better opportunity, a better boss, a better break. What separated them wasn't luck. It wasn't who they knew. It was what they believed about money before either of them ever made their first serious decision. And that's what this is about. Not strategies, not tips, not a 5-step financial plan. This is about going deeper than any of that. Because if the foundation is broken, you can build all you want on top of it and watch it collapse. But when you fix the foundation, when you actually understand what you believe and why, and you start to reshape it, everything built on top of that changes. So the question I want to start with is this: where did your beliefs about money actually come from? Think back, not to last year or 5 years ago. Go all the way back. What were the conversations in your home about money? Was money a source of stress? Was it something people thought about? Was it something that was never talked about because it was too shameful or too difficult? Was it something people chased and never found? Or maybe it was something your family had and then lost, and you absorbed the message that money is unstable, money is unreliable, money can be taken. Every single one of us absorbed a money story before we were old enough to question it, before we had any framework for evaluating whether what we were hearing was true. Kids don't have filters. They take in everything as absolute truth, and the things repeated most often, said with the most emotion, shown through the most visible behavior. Those became the deepest beliefs. Here's one I hear constantly: money doesn't grow on trees. That phrase. Think about how many times you heard some version of that growing up. What does that statement actually imply? It implies scarcity. It implies limitation. It implies that money is something finite, something scarce, something that has to be carefully guarded because there's only so much of it and it's hard to replace. Now take that belief and imagine it running in the background of every financial decision you make. Every time an opportunity shows up that requires investment, that belief fires. Every time you think about asking for a raise, that belief fires. Every time you consider charging more for your services or your work, that belief fires. There's not enough. Be careful. Don't reach too far. You might lose what little you have. That's not a strategy problem. That's a belief problem. Or consider this one: rich people are greedy. Maybe you heard it explicitly. Maybe you absorbed it from the way the wealthy were talked about in your home or your community. Maybe it came from movies, from media, from cultural messages that painted successful people as villains. And now you have a belief buried deep that says accumulating significant wealth makes you a bad person, makes you someone who takes advantage of others, makes you someone who sacrifices integrity for money. So what happens when you start to get successful? What happens when you start to earn more? That belief kicks in and it becomes a threat to your identity because you're a good person. You're not greedy. You care about people. And so unconsciously, without even realizing it, you find ways to not let the money accumulate. You spend it. You give it away impulsively. You sabotage deals. You undercharge. You undervalue because your psyche is protecting your identity by keeping you away from becoming something you believe is bad. That's not a discipline problem. That's a belief problem. And this is where it gets powerful because the moment you can see the belief clearly, not just feel its effect, but actually name it, trace it back to where it came from, understand why you adopted it, you start to have choice. Right now, most people have no choice. The belief runs automatically. You don't choose to undercharge. You don't choose to sabotage yourself. It just happens and you wonder why and you blame external circumstances because the real cause is invisible to you. Invisible beliefs driving visible behavior. Let me go deeper into this because I want you to understand something about the nature of belief that most conversations about money completely miss. A belief isn't just a thought. A belief is a thought that has been emotionally reinforced until it feels like a fact, until it feels like the truth about reality. And once something feels like the truth, your brain stops questioning it. It stops asking, is this actually true? Because facts don't get questioned. You don't walk outside every morning and wonder whether the sky will still be blue. You just know it will be. That's how a belief operates. It becomes that certain. It becomes invisible in its influence. So when someone with a deep scarcity belief hears about a business opportunity that could genuinely change their financial life, their brain doesn't process it as an opportunity. It processes it as a threat. Because the belief says there isn't enough, so any promise of more than you currently have is either a lie, a scam, or something that will require you to lose something else to gain it. The logic of the limiting belief becomes the filter for all incoming information. Evidence that confirms the belief gets amplified. Evidence that contradicts the belief gets dismissed. This is why you can show some people success stories, and instead of being inspired, they find reasons why those examples don't apply to them. That person got lucky. They had connections. That worked in a different economy. The limiting belief is actively defending itself. It's protecting its own survival because beliefs, whether helpful or harmful, want to stay in place. They're stabilizing mechanisms. They make the world predictable. And predictability feels safe even when it keeps you stuck. Think about that for a moment. Predictable poverty can feel safer than uncertain wealth. Not consciously, not in a way you would choose. But at the level of deep programming, staying where you are is familiar, and familiar is safe. And safe is where the nervous system wants to go, especially when it was shaped during a time of real scarcity or stress. This is the trap that traps the most intelligent, hardworking people. They are not failing because they're lazy. They are not failing because they lack skill. They are working against themselves without even knowing it. And the work they're doing against themselves is completely invisible. Now, I want to introduce something that I think changes the entire conversation. I want to talk about what I call the money identity. Your money identity is not what you earn. It's not what you know. It's the deep internal sense of who you are in relationship to money. It's the story you carry about what kind of person you are financially. And most people have a money identity that was assigned to them by their environment before they had any say in the matter. Maybe you grew up hearing messages like, we're not the kind of people who have a lot of money, or money is for other people, not people like us, or be grateful for what you have. Don't be greedy. Now, those messages might have come from love. They might have come from genuine wisdom. Your parents or grandparents might have been teaching you not to be materialistic, not to be entitled, but what your developing mind heard was something different. What it absorbed was a classification, a category, a tribe identity. And tribe identity is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. We are wired to belong. We are wired to fit in with the group we grew up in. And if the group carries a specific identity around money, If your people are the kind of people who work hard but don't get ahead, who struggle, who live paycheck to paycheck, then financial success becomes a subconscious act of betrayal. It means leaving the tribe. It means being different. And being different triggers a primal fear because for most of human history, being ejected from the tribe meant death. This is why so many people self-sabotage precisely when they are on the verge of a breakthrough. I've seen it happen hundreds of times. Someone is right on the edge of real financial growth, and suddenly they make a strange decision that pulls them back. They take on debt they didn't need. They end a business partnership that was working. They stop doing the habits that were generating results. And they have explanations for all of it, real, logical sounding explanations. But underneath every one of those explanations is the same thing, the pull of the tribe, the gravitational force of the money identity saying, you've gone too far from who we are. Come back. You cannot fight this force with strategy. You can only fight it with awareness and then with deliberate, conscious identity reconstruction. Now, here's something I need you to understand, because this is where most of the motivational conversation about money falls short. People tell you to think positively about money, affirm abundance, visualize wealth. And while I'm not dismissing the power of the mind, if you try to layer positive money affirmations on top of a deeply negative money identity, what you get is conflict. You get internal noise. You get the experience of saying, I am abundant and wealthy, while a voice somewhere inside you says, no, you're not. Don't be ridiculous. And that second voice is louder because it's older, because it's rooted deeper, because it has more emotional evidence behind it. This is why affirmations fail for so many people. Not because affirmations are inherently useless, but because you can't think your way out of a belief you felt your way into. The belief was installed through experience, through repetition, through emotion, and it has to be changed through experience, through repetition, through emotion. Different emotions, different experiences, deliberately chosen. So let me give you the actual framework for how this works, how beliefs about money actually change. The first thing that has to happen is recognition. You have to see the belief clearly, not feel its effects, actually identify the belief itself. Most people live their entire lives feeling the effect of their money beliefs without ever identifying the belief itself. They just experience the consequences. They wonder why they keep ending up in the same financial situations. They look for external causes, and they never find the real one because they never look inside. So recognition means asking yourself some uncomfortable questions. When you think about having a lot of money, real wealth, what is the first emotion that comes up? Not your intellectual response, your gut response. Some people feel excitement. That's a good sign, but many people feel anxiety, guilt, unworthiness, or even something like danger. That emotional response is pointing directly at a belief. Follow the emotion. Ask yourself, what would have to be true for me to feel this way about having money? You might discover, I believe that having a lot of money would make me different from my family in a way that would create distance. That's a real belief, a real cost. And now you can examine it. Is that actually true? Is it inevitable that wealth changes relationships? Or are there examples, many examples, of people who gained financial success and maintained or deepened their most important relationships? That examination is the second phase. I call it interrogation. You interrogate the belief, you put it on trial. You ask it to prove itself. You look for contrary evidence, because limiting beliefs feel like facts, and they survive by never being questioned. The moment you start questioning them, really questioning them, bringing evidence to the conversation, they start to lose their grip. A belief that says, money will make me a bad person, cannot survive an honest examination of the world around you. Because the world is full of examples of people who are genuinely good and genuinely wealthy, people who have used financial abundance to create extraordinary positive impact. The belief that wealth corrupts is contradicted constantly by reality, but your brain has been filtering that evidence out. Once you start consciously looking for it, it starts to land. It starts to register. The third phase is replacement. This is where you consciously install a new belief. And this is where I want to be clear, because I said affirmations often don't work. But replacement isn't just affirmation. Replacement is experience. It's choosing new behaviors that generate new emotional evidence. It's surrounding yourself with people who have the money identity you want so that your brain starts to normalize it. It's finding examples, real documented examples of people whose story resonates with yours, who built something meaningful. It's making decisions from the new belief, even before the new belief feels completely real. That last part is crucial. The new belief doesn't have to feel real before you act on it. In fact, for most people, action precedes belief. You act differently first. The new results generate new emotional evidence. The emotional evidence feeds the new belief. And gradually, not overnight, but genuinely, the old belief loses its grip. Let me bring this to something concrete. Let me talk about one of the most destructive money beliefs that I encounter across every demographic. The belief that earning more requires suffering. This belief says that money comes through pain, through grinding, through sacrificing everything you enjoy in life, through doing things you hate for decades, and maybe if you're lucky, you get to rest at the end. This belief comes from a very understandable place. It often reflects real patterns that people saw in the adults around them. People who worked exhausting jobs for inadequate pay. People whose relationship with money was genuinely one of suffering. And so the lesson absorbed was, this is what money requires. But what that belief actually does is make the pursuit of money feel like a punishment. Every step toward financial growth becomes associated with pain and sacrifice. And your nervous system, which is exquisitely designed to move toward pleasure and away from pain, starts to resist the very behaviors that would create financial improvement. You procrastinate on the things that would generate income. You avoid the conversations, the decisions, the commitments that would advance your financial life. Not because you're weak, because your unconscious mind is protecting you from something it believes will hurt. When you replace that belief, when you genuinely install the understanding that building wealth can be energizing, that the right work doesn't feel like suffering, that financial growth and enjoyment of life are not opposites, something shifts in your motivation. The resistance decreases. The procrastination loses some of its power, because now the path forward isn't pointing toward pain. It's pointing toward something your nervous system can actually move toward. And I want to be honest with you here. There is real work involved in building a financial life. I'm not going to tell you it's all easy and painless. There are difficult conversations. There are periods of delayed gratification. There are risks. But the difference between those things being experienced as meaningful challenge versus crushing suffering, that difference is entirely determined by your beliefs about what the experience means. Same experience. Radically different interpretation. And interpretation determines everything about how you show up. Let me shift now to something that I believe is one of the most overlooked dimensions of money psychology. I want to talk about the relationship between money and self-worth. For many people, money and self-worth are deeply entangled in a way that creates a kind of financial paralysis. When self-worth is tied to net worth, a few things happen. When money is flowing, self-worth goes up. When money is not flowing, when there's scarcity or failure or a business that doesn't work, self-worth collapses. And self-worth collapsing is one of the most psychologically dangerous places a person can be. It leads to desperate decisions. It leads to avoidance. It leads to a shutdown of exactly the creativity and resourcefulness you need most in difficult moments. And when self-worth is chronically low, it affects what you believe you deserve. I cannot overstate how powerful this is. Your sense of what you deserve is directly reflected in your financial behavior. People who fundamentally believe they deserve little, charge little, accept little, and stop themselves from advancing every time they start to do better than they believe they should. It's not conscious. It's automatic. The thermostat of the psyche kicks in and maintains the temperature that matches the internal belief about deserving. I've seen this in people who sabotage salary negotiations right when they're winning. People who suddenly find reasons to leave good financial situations. People who are brilliant and capable and perpetually underpaid because they literally cannot bring themselves to have the conversation that would change it. They tell themselves stories about why it's not the right time, about why they shouldn't push, about how they don't want to seem greedy. But underneath every one of those rationalizations is the same thing, a belief that they don't quite deserve more than what they have. Rebuilding that is deep work, but it's not impossible. And the starting point is always the same: separation. You have to separate your worth as a human being from your financial results. These are not the same thing. Your net worth is not your worth. Your income is not your value. Your financial situation right now reflects 1,000 factors, many of them having nothing to do with your actual capability intelligence, or inherent worth. It reflects your beliefs, your conditioning, your environment, the opportunities you had access to, the information you received. Changing those inputs changes the output. But it cannot change if you're so identified with the current output that you've decided it's the truth about who you are. When you genuinely separate your self-worth from your financial results, something interesting happens. You stop being defensive about where you are. You stop protecting the story about why you're there, and you start being curious about what's actually driving it and how to change it. Defensiveness disappears when there's nothing to defend. And from a place of honest curiosity, real growth becomes possible. Let me talk about another belief that operates with extraordinary subtlety. This is the belief around safety and money. For many people, at a completely unconscious level, having money does not feel safe. This seems counterintuitive. Rationally, we understand that financial security creates safety, but psychological safety and rational safety are not the same thing. And for people who grew up with experiences where having things led to losing things, whether that's wealth that was taken, security that disappeared, abundance that was followed by crisis, the association between having money and experiencing loss can become very deeply embedded. The result is a behavior pattern where the nervous system actually works to get rid of money when it accumulates. Because accumulation has been associated with eventual loss, it's safer at the level of the nervous system to never have too much, because then you don't have to experience the pain of losing it. The person spends impulsively. The person finds ways to give money away before they can save it. The person makes poor investment decisions when they finally have capital. And all of it happens beneath the level of awareness. They are genuinely puzzled by their own behavior. This is one of the cruelest patterns I've seen, because these are often people who work extraordinarily hard, who genuinely want financial stability, who cannot understand why it keeps slipping through their hands. And the reason it keeps slipping is that there's a part of their psychology actively releasing it, because holding it feels like setting themselves up for a fall. The path out of this particular pattern starts with safety work. It starts with learning to tolerate the experience of accumulation without the emotional anticipation of loss. It means staying conscious when money is building, noticing the anxiety that arises, not running from it, but sitting with it long enough to realize that the catastrophe the nervous system is predicting is not actually happening. You can have more, you can hold on to it. Nothing terrible is coming. The world can surprise you differently than it has before. That requires practice. It requires small wins. It requires deliberately creating financial experiences that end differently than the old pattern. But it is absolutely possible. And I have seen people break this pattern and create financial stability they never believed they were capable of. Now, I want to address something directly, because it's a question I know is sitting in a lot of people's minds right now. You might be thinking, okay, I understand that my beliefs are affecting me, but how much? Is it really possible that beliefs are the primary obstacle when I have real financial challenges, real debt, real lack of income, real limited options? And this is where I want to be absolutely clear, because I'm not here to minimize real circumstances. Real obstacles exist, systemic barriers exist. Access to opportunity is genuinely unequal, and that matters. I am not making the argument that beliefs are the only thing standing between you and wealth, or that positive thinking erases real-world constraints. What I am saying is this: within whatever real constraints exist in your situation, your beliefs determine how fully and effectively you operate. They determine what opportunities you see and which you dismiss. They determine how persistently you pursue what matters. They determine what risks you're willing to take and which you rationalize away. They determine the quality of your decisions when you're under pressure. They determine whether you learn from financial mistakes or repeat them. They determine your relationship with money in a way that shows up in every financial interaction you have. Two people in identical circumstances, same income, same debt, same community, can have radically different financial trajectories over 5 years based almost entirely on the beliefs they bring to their situation. That's not a theory. That's something I've observed directly many times. So the answer is not beliefs explain everything. The answer is beliefs explain far more than most people are willing to examine. And examining them is the most powerful thing you can do regardless of your current circumstances. Let me tell you about a pattern I call the perpetual almost. The perpetual almost is the experience of getting close to financial stability, close to a breakthrough, close to something that would genuinely change your life, and then something happens. Something always happens. A deal falls through. An unexpected expense erases the progress. A relationship that was a financial anchor doesn't work out. An opportunity that looked perfect turns out to be a mirage. People who live in the perpetual almost have usually convinced themselves that they're just unlucky, that life is conspiring against them, that every time they get close, something outside of them interferes. But when you look carefully at the perpetual almost, you almost always find the hand of the person themselves in what happened, not their deliberate choice. Their unconscious navigation. They were heading somewhere that conflicted with a core belief, and the belief created the obstacle. Sometimes through a decision they rationalize brilliantly, sometimes through a behavior that they'll describe as a mistake, not recognizing that the mistake was driven by a belief that was protecting itself. The perpetual almost is the most expensive place to live in the financial landscape because you're close enough to success to keep trying, but your beliefs ensure you never quite arrive. And every near miss reinforces the story that success is something that happens to other people, that you're cursed, that the universe is against you. All of which are beliefs that keep the pattern intact. Breaking the perpetual almost requires an honest audit, not of your circumstances, of yourself, a genuinely honest look at your own role in the pattern, at the moments where your choices, even the ones that seemed reasonable or even wise at the time, steered you away from the breakthrough. That's uncomfortable work. It's uncomfortable because it requires giving up a story you've been using to explain your situation. And stories feel important. They give meaning to our struggle. But sometimes the story is the cage. Let me talk now about one of the beliefs that I think creates the most long-term damage, the belief that financial education is either too complicated or irrelevant to people like you. This belief has many versions. I'm not good with money. I'm not a business person. Math and finance aren't my thing. I grew up in a family that didn't talk about money, and I don't really understand how it works. And the effect of this belief is a withdrawal from the entire domain of financial learning. The person doesn't engage with information about investing, about building income, about understanding how money actually moves in the economy. They stay in a state of financial ignorance, not because they're incapable of understanding it, but because they've decided in advance that it's not for them. The cost of this is enormous, because while you're avoiding the topic, the world continues to operate with specific financial mechanics that affect your life whether or not you engage with them. The price of not understanding compound growth, for example, not the math of it, but the felt reality of it, is paid in decades of delayed financial growth. The price of not understanding how to evaluate risk is paid in decisions made from fear or naivety rather than informed judgment. The price of not understanding value exchange, how to create it, how to price it, how to communicate it, is paid in chronic under-earning. Financial literacy is not a talent. It's not something you're born with or without. It's a skill. Like any skill, it develops through engagement, through learning, through making mistakes and reflecting on them. And most of the core concepts are actually far more accessible than the belief "this isn't for me" allows you to discover. The belief itself is the barrier to discovering how learnable this actually is. Now, I want to move into something that I think transforms the conversation in a practical way, because understanding the problem, however deeply, only becomes valuable when it creates change. And change requires knowing not just what to think differently, but what to do differently. Here's a framework for beginning the actual work of reshaping your money beliefs. The first step is building what I call a financial self-portrait. This means sitting down, not quickly, not while you're distracted, and actually writing out your beliefs about money. Every belief you can identify, where you believe money comes from, what you believe about people who have it, what you believe about what it would cost you to have more, what you believe about your own capacity to earn, build, and keep it. Don't edit yourself. Don't write what you think you should believe. Write what you actually believe, because you cannot change something you won't honestly name. The second step is tracing the origin. For each belief on that list, ask yourself, where did this come from? How old was I when I first absorbed this? Who was teaching it, directly or through their behavior? Was it deliberately taught, or just something I absorbed from watching how money was handled in my environment? Tracing the origin does something powerful. It creates distance between you and the belief. It reminds you that you didn't choose this belief. It was chosen for you by circumstances and people operating with their own limitations and fears. And what wasn't chosen can be unchosen. The third step is testing. Take each belief and bring it to reality. Find evidence. Look for examples, real, verifiable examples that contradict the belief. If you believe wealth corrupts character, find people who are both wealthy and deeply ethical. Study their lives, not to idealize them, but to use them as evidence that the absolute version of your belief is false. Because limiting beliefs almost always operate in absolutes. Money changes people. Rich people don't care about others. Hard work never pays off. When you expose the absolute version of the belief to reality, it breaks down. You can replace money always corrupts with money can amplify existing character. And my job is to build strong character as I build financial strength. The fourth step is deliberate new experiences. This is where behavior change enters the picture. Every time you take an action that contradicts a limiting belief, you are chipping away at it. Every time you charge what your work is actually worth, instead of discounting because of unworthiness, you create a new emotional experience. Every time you save instead of spending reactively, you are practicing a new money identity. Every time you have the uncomfortable financial conversation you've been avoiding, you are proving to your nervous system that engaging with money doesn't have to lead to disaster. The accumulation of these small, deliberate acts is what gradually rewires the financial self-concept, not a single grand gesture, not one big decision. The consistency of small acts that align with who you are becoming rather than who you were conditioned to be. The fifth step is community. And I want to emphasize this because it's the step most people skip. Your beliefs about money are profoundly influenced by the people around you. If everyone in your immediate circle has the same limiting beliefs you do, if scarcity thinking is the norm, if financial struggle is the shared story, if wealth is discussed with suspicion, then changing your own beliefs will feel like swimming upstream constantly. Not impossible, but much harder than it needs to be. Finding even one or two people who have a healthy, abundant relationship with money, who can model a different story, who can challenge your assumptions, who can share experiences that contradict your limiting beliefs, changes the environment in which your beliefs exist. You don't have to leave behind the people you love, but you do have to deliberately expose yourself to different perspectives, different models, different evidence about what's possible. This is why mentorship is so powerful. Not just because of the information a mentor transfers, but because of the identity exposure. Being around someone who has built what you want to build and who is genuinely good and genuinely human and genuinely someone you can relate to, that breaks the abstract nature of the goal. It makes it concrete. It makes it possible. Not just intellectually possible, emotionally possible. And that's the difference that matters. Let me talk now about a particularly modern belief pattern around money that I think is creating enormous damage. It's the belief that financial success is incompatible with good values. That wanting wealth means you've prioritized money over people, over meaning, over the things that actually matter. This belief is wrapped in genuine virtue. It comes from a real understanding that unchecked greed causes harm. That material obsession creates emptiness. That some people do trade their integrity for financial gain. And those things are real. But the belief overextends from those real observations to a conclusion that any significant financial ambition is morally suspect. The result is that many people who care deeply about their families, about their communities, about doing good in the world, actively resist financial growth because they've associated that growth with a loss of the values they hold most dear. They unconsciously choose struggle as a way of proving their virtue. They turn away from opportunities that would increase their financial power because they don't trust themselves or the world to handle that power wisely. But consider what financial constraint actually costs in terms of impact. Consider what you could do for the people you love with more financial strength. Consider what you could contribute to the causes that matter to you with actual resources rather than just good intentions. Consider what options would open up for your children, for your health, for your freedom to choose meaningful work if the financial pressure you live under every day were simply not there. Wanting more financial strength is not inherently incompatible with good values. In fact, for someone with genuine values, building financial strength is one of the most powerful things they can do. because it multiplies the impact of those values. Money in the hands of someone with integrity is a tool for good. And refusing to have it doesn't make the world better. It just removes a good person from the financial equation. That reframe, moving from wealth corrupts to wealth amplifies whoever you already are, is one of the most important shifts I can offer you. Because if you're a person of integrity and your values are solid, financial growth doesn't threaten those things. It empowers them. The work is not to stay small to protect your character. The work is to grow your character so it can handle the responsibility of growth. Now, I want to address the relationship between patience and money beliefs because this is an area that I think is becoming increasingly critical in the current moment. We live in a world that is saturated with images of fast financial success. Social media serves up constant examples of people who seem to have achieved massive wealth quickly. And while some of those examples are real, many are curated illusions. But regardless, the effect on money psychology is significant. It installs an expectation, sometimes a demand, that results should be fast, that if progress is slow, something is wrong. Either the strategy is wrong, or you're not capable, or the opportunity isn't real. This impatience is a belief. It's a belief that says real success should come quickly, and slow success is a sign of failure. And this belief destroys more financial potential than almost anything else, because the most powerful financial forces, compound growth, relationship building, skill accumulation, reputation development, are all slow. They are all long games. They reward patience with extraordinary returns, but they appear to be doing nothing for years before the results become visible. Most people quit at exactly the point where patience would have paid off. They look at the slow progress and conclude that the approach is wrong. They switch strategies. They abandon things that were working. They restart constantly. And the restart erases all the compounded progress that was invisibly building. Then they try something new, get similarly slow early results, and decide that's not working either. And the cycle continues. The belief that has to replace the impatience is something like, what I build slowly, I build solidly. The foundation I'm creating right now is invisible, but it is real. And the more genuinely I build it, the more extraordinary the eventual result. That belief changes how you interpret slow progress. It transforms it from evidence of failure to evidence of real building. And that interpretation change makes all the difference in whether you stay consistent long enough for the compounding to work. Let me bring this towards something I think is the foundation underneath all of it. Because we've talked about specific beliefs and specific patterns, but there's a root level belief that underlies all of them. And addressing it is, in many ways, the most important work of all. The root belief is about whether or not you matter enough for your financial life to be different. This sounds almost too simple, but hear me. At the deepest level of the psychology of financial struggle, there is very often a quiet, barely articulated sense that the life you want, the financial security, the freedom, the opportunities that life is for other people, people who were born into the right situation, people who got the right breaks, people who are somehow more deserving, more capable, more marked for success, and you, in some fundamental way that you've never quite said out loud, don't quite make that list. That belief doesn't announce itself loudly. It rarely says, you don't deserve to be wealthy. It whispers it through the subtle self-deprecation, through the almost reflexive dismissal of your own ideas, through the comparison to others that always seems to end with them winning, through the constant sense that you're slightly behind, slightly less than, slightly not quite enough. And every financial decision you make, every action you take or don't take is being filtered through that quiet question, do I matter enough for this to actually work for me? I want to tell you something directly. The answer to that question is yes. Not because success is guaranteed. Not because your path will be easy. Not because you deserve something simply by existing, but because your capacity to learn to adapt, to make decisions, to build relationships, to create value, that capacity is real. It's not owned exclusively by any particular type of person. It's the birthright of every conscious human being who is willing to do the inner work and the outer work that growth requires. But that belief that you matter enough has to be chosen. It won't be given to you. The world does not automatically affirm your worth. The circumstances of your past were not designed to build your confidence. And so you have to make the deliberate choice to believe in your own capacity, not blindly, not with false certainty, but with the kind of grounded confidence that says, I may not know everything I need to know yet, but I'm capable of learning it. I may not have everything in place yet, but I'm capable of building it. That choice, that quiet, firm, personal choice to believe in your own capacity is the foundation that everything else is built on. And here's the beautiful and somewhat daunting truth about that foundation: you can start building it right now, not after your circumstances improve, not after you get the break you've been waiting for, not after someone finally recognizes your value. Right now, in the midst of your current reality, you can begin choosing the belief that your financial life can be different, that you are capable of making it different, that the story you've been telling yourself about money is not the truth about your future, it's just the truth about your past. You are not your history, you are your potential, and your potential is determined more than anything else by what you choose to believe is possible. Let me come back to where we started. You've been working, you've been trying, you've been doing everything that, from the outside, looks like what you're supposed to do. And the results haven't matched. Now you understand something you didn't fully understand before. You understand that the gap between your effort and your results is almost certainly not a strategy problem. It's a belief problem. A deep, invisible, emotionally embedded set of stories about money, about worth, about safety, about identity, stories that were written long before you had the wisdom to question them. And now you have something more valuable than any financial strategy. You have a direction. You know where the real work is. You know that changing your financial life begins with the work of changing what you believe is possible. For money, for yourself, and for the relationship between the two. That work is not fast. I won't pretend it is. Old beliefs don't dissolve in a week. The gravitational pull of old identity doesn't disappear after one conversation. But every time you choose awareness over automatic reaction, every time you interrogate a belief instead of accepting it as fact, every time you take a small action that aligns with who you're becoming instead of who you've been, you are building something real. Something that compounds over time, just like money does when it's properly directed. The financial life you want is not on the other side of a better opportunity. It's not on the other side of a lucky break. It's on the other side of a changed relationship with your own beliefs. And that door, unlike many other doors, is one you can open yourself. So the question isn't whether change is possible. The question is whether you're willing to do the one thing that most people in your situation aren't willing to do, to look honestly at the beliefs you carry, to take full responsibility for the role they play in your financial life, and to begin, deliberately, consistently, courageously, the work of becoming someone with a different relationship to money. That becoming starts not tomorrow, not when the conditions are right, not when you feel ready. It starts with the understanding you now carry from this conversation, with the awareness you didn't have when this began. What you believe about money is costing you. Now you know that. And knowing that, really knowing it, is the beginning of being able to change it. The rest is up to you.